Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this dark and stormy night. But I was thinking, it's a wet night, but we're here to talk about some wet books. So it works out. I'm Susanna Hermans, co-owner of Oblong Books. Tonight we are so excited to be here with our dear friend Nancy Castaldo. Nancy has been writing books for kids about science and nature for over 20 years. And her books have received numerous awards, including the Green Earth Book Award, a Crystal Kite Award, a Sigurd Olson Best Nature Book honorable mention, among many others. I, for one, love most putting Nancy's books into the hands of kids who are excited about science. Her books are amazing, they're for many different ages, and tonight, not only is she here for one book, she's here for two books. And they're both connected deeply to where we live here in New York and in the Hudson Valley. Riverkeeper and Whales in the City. So Nancy's gonna tell us all about these great books, and while she's talking, I want you to think about good questions to ask at the end. Please join me in welcoming Nancy Castaldo.
Thanks so much, everybody, for coming out. Seriously, on this dark and stormy night. Oh my goodness, right? The rain is beating us down. But, as my husband reminded me, it's raining in the river too, and I don't think the whales mind, I don't think the fish are minding it at this point, so it's pretty appropriate that we're talking about water during this time. And yes, I'm happy to be talking about these two books for two different age groups. And I'm going to talk a little bit about whales first, and then move on to Riverkeeper. And I have a special guest joining me for Riverkeeper for that discussion in a little bit. So I'm going to start with, first of all, I was born and bred on the Hudson River, basically, on the banks. I was able to see the Hudson River from my house for my entire childhood and even in college. So it was such an important part of my life growing up. And as I got older, I moved north, higher up into the valley. So I have been able to see the river at its very tiniest up in the Adirondack Mountains all the way down to where it meets the Atlantic Ocean. I've seen it when it has had, I would say, been at its worst when I was a child, and my mother and father did not allow me to swim in it. And I've seen it now, and I've seen such recovery. And what I wanted to do was talk about the recovery of the river and how we have moved it forward, and how there is still more to do to keep it as wonderful as it is now, and even more so in the future. So I'm going to first talk to you about Whales in the City. And this has an interesting story. I was on the train coming up from Manhattan to the Poughkeepsie train station and riding along Metro North, and pointing out all of the sites to a friend of mine who was visiting from Michigan, who had never been to the Hudson Valley. And I was pointing out, this is where I lived, and this is West Point, and all of the sites in the mountains in Storm King, and all of the beautiful features of the river. And then I said, and we have whales now. And the whales have returned after 100 years of not being in the river. And I started to tell her this story about the whales. And she's also an author, and she looked at me and she said, "You should write that." And it got tucked away a little bit for a little bit of time. I had already written a book about the river years ago as part of a bigger book about North American rivers. It was called River Wild. So the river's always kind of, fed its way into some of my writings. But it was the pandemic that actually, I think, really made me focus on my own area. When I wasn't traveling to many other places for my books. So I started to write Whales, and I'm going to read it to you in a moment, and then I started to write Riverkeeper. And coincidentally, they are two different publishing houses, but they both released this spring, which is wonderful because they're both for different age levels, and I'll talk a little bit more about the difference. But Whales in the City is illustrated by Chuck Groening, who is also a Hudson Valley illustrator, and comes here from the Netherlands, so didn't grow up here and is here now. And the pictures that he drew to accompany my book, I have to say, are just spectacular. I was in awe of it when I saw it. So I'm going to read you this story about this wonderful recovery story. Just have to show you those end pages. Whales in the city. Before there were ships and streets and buildings and a city called New York, we were here. We dipped and floated and spun from the wide blue ocean into the river and around the great wild island. We came, we swam, we filled our bellies with fish. The water was clean and fresh and clear. We were home, but great wooden ships brought many new people to the island from far across the ocean. The city grew and grew and grew. Buildings scraped the sky above. A great big city. Bigger than us. Great big whales. The water around the island became busier too. Schooners, skiffs, and barges sailed among us in the city's harbor. A great big harbor. People overfished the waters and hunted us. Factories sprang up along the river. Big factories. The water changed, darker and dirtier, from clear as glass to fish scale silver and sickly sweet and with smelly, stinky waste. Even the fish couldn't breathe in the water. Up to the surface they'd swim, then poke their heads out like we did through the oily surface and take big gulps of air. The water was too dirty for fish, too dirty for swimming, too dirty for us. And so the few of us who remained swam into the waves of the North Atlantic for cleaner waters and a safer home. Before there were ships and streets and buildings in a city called New York, there were whales. They dipped and floated and spun from the wide blue ocean into the river and around the great wild island. They came, they swam, they filled their bellies with fish. The water was clean and fresh and clear. They were home, but we filled the waters with ships. We grew a city. We polluted the water until there were no whales. It took many years, but finally people along the river said, enough. We wanted our water clear again. We missed the whales and fish, so we picked up trash from the shores. We protested, marched, and voted. We dreamed of the day our river would once again flow clean. We joined together for America's first Earth Day. We'll all drown in garbage up to our eyeballs, reach the ears in Union Square. More people joined us in raising our voices, great big crowds. In Washington, D.C., we demanded laws to protect the river. Clean water now. We signed petitions, we made phone calls, we wrote letters, we worked hard until the Clean Water Act was passed. No more chemicals, no more colors, no more sugar wastewater. The water was protected. Time passed as it did from high in the Adirondack Mountains to the Statue of Liberty. The water grew cleaner and fresher. We marveled at the river with pride. We worked to keep it clean. The fish returned. People began enjoying the river again. And finally, after a century, the whales came back, dipping and floating and spinning all the way from the wide blue ocean. Great big whales. They swim around the Statue of Liberty. They fill their bellies with fresh fish. They watch crowds of people on tour boat decks. Although there are ships and streets and buildings and a big city called New York, there are also whales. And the whales are home, our home. The end. I have an author's note and a timeline about the Hudson River, and I have more about the different species of whales that inhabit the harbor and the lower part of our Hudson River. So this was a book, it's designed for young readers, and it tells a wonderful recovery story about these whales coming back after so long, and the fish that that a lot of these whales are eating is a specific species that I talk about in the end of the book. And that species of fish was gone for many, many years and is now returned. So again, it's a book designed for young readers to show that we all can make a difference, that we all can do something to make our community, our rivers better. And it's also a book about coexistence, how we can live with our wildlife. We can live with, there can be a city, and there can also be whales in the river. There can be wildlife, and there can also be people. So that's the story of whales in the city. Now, Riverkeeper is sort of like telling you all how the sausage is made. Yes, the petitions went out, the protests happened, and as I said, that's for younger readers. Riverkeeper's for a bit older readers, and it talks about both the position of Riverkeeper and the organization of Riverkeeper. And we are blessed in this area to have an organization and a person that holds the title of Riverkeeper. And our Riverkeeper, our Hudson River Riverkeeper, is a model for all riverkeepers and all water keepers across the country and across the globe. So it talks about the history and the early. It's done with photographs that I took in the research, which I have to say was one of my most favorite books to research, because, you know, not only is it in the backyard, but I didn't mind riding up and down the river with our Riverkeeper boat captain, and being able to see the river from that perspective was really fun. So I'm going to ask Tracy Brown, who is our Riverkeeper, head of the Riverkeeper organization, to come up and join me so that we can talk a little bit about what Riverkeeper does. And then we're going to have some time for some questions as well. One of the things that Tracy mentioned, and Tracy's office is in the Lower Hudson, and I'm so happy to have you here with us tonight to talk about more about what we do and what Riverkeeper does. Thank you. And one of the things that I know that you said to me when we were talking and we were having our discussion was that you talked about co-parenting with the river. And that has just resonated with me and stuck in my mind while I was writing the book and after, even now, because I think about how I was raised alongside the river. And I think there's so many people that probably have that same feeling. Could you start by talking a little bit about what that meant, what you meant when you were talking about that, before you get into a little bit more?
Sure. So I think you know, connecting with a really beautiful natural place, a river, a mountain, the ocean, is like having a good parent. And it teaches you so many things when you really have time, when you're young, to be outside and in those natural places, that there's just kind of like limitless wisdom and perspective and resources. And for me, you know, I had my first child when I was living in Brooklyn, and I really felt that I couldn't let them be free in the natural world, that even when we had parks, it was a lot about like, stay over here and don't touch that and this is that thing, and just wanting to give them the freedom that you can have in a safe space that's a wild space.
Yeah. Yeah.
to have that autonomy to explore and just kind of learn from the natural world, I think is just a huge gift that we can give our children.
And I think that's what makes the story of Riverkeeper, this book, universal, because rivers are obviously throughout all of our country, and we were talking about how the rivers, that we all live in a watershed, and that I was telling a group of educators last night that I feel like water is life, and our Hudson River is sort of like our main artery, and that all of those tributaries and creeks that run off of it are just all the capillaries that feed us, and feed our souls and our bodies, and that is the same everywhere you live, because everybody has their own water, their own rivers, their own creeks and little streams that go into their own habitat. So we get that nourishment wherever we are.
Yeah, and that feeling of being connected, right? So I think one of the things that's interesting about the Hudson and the way just the shape of where we live, the valley, is that you feel always at home so long as you're by the river and can see the river. Wherever you are in the valley, there's this touchstone, you know, like if you lived in, you know, a city with a great monument, you know, you can always orient yourself by a certain cathedral or a milestone. And I feel like for us, it's the river and our tributaries to the river, and it does create a sense of community and belonging as you travel within a pretty far expanse.
It does. And, you know, I spoke a little bit about how I wasn't allowed to swim in it. And when I went and spoke with you about the book, when I was interviewing you, we were on a beach.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, you know, swimming in the river.
Yeah.
And that's something that I was unable to do. So it's through all of the actions of communities and organizations like Riverkeeper and Scenic Hudson and Clearwater that have come together to strengthen our river so that it is swimmable in a lot of areas. It is able to be fished and enjoyed, and whales can return. So like I say, this book really tells the nitty-gritty on even so much as taking dams down on the creeks. You know, we have all of these old mills in the valley. Our valley's old. I mean, think about the history of the Hudson Valley and all of the old mills that were all along the river, all along the little streams and creeks that fed into the river, the tributaries, that are abandoned for so many years now. The mills are long gone. The dams are in disrepair, and just stopping all those little fish that are swimming up from the ocean from spawning into those outlets. And I can remember, I think it was John, the boat captain, who told me, you know, to watch a fish, you know, be swimming when you have a little camera near that dam, and basically they swim, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're up against a dam. They can't move forward. So one of the things that Riverkeeper is doing, and along with other organizations that are partnering, is removing some of these dams along, and that's happening in rivers across the country, from the Pacific, the name of that river, the Klamath, yes, to take those dams out and let those rivers run wild again, enables all of our wildlife to just be and live, and of course keeps them healthy, but us healthy.
Yeah.
In the long run.
Yeah, so dam removal is a huge priority for us right now, and it does have so many benefits. So it has, like Nancy's saying, it's amazing for the fish to access habitat that they've lost, especially where a lot of the habitat's degraded, so they're very much in need of the upstream shaded cooler waters that they've been blocked from. But it also really helps us with flooding in our communities. So when we have free-flowing rivers, they have a lot more if that's a word, ability to ebb and flow and absorb rain like we're having today. And if you have a stream that's constricted, that's maybe been put in a channel or that has a dam at it, these heavy rain events that we're getting more and more put pressure on those old dams. many of which serve no purpose and were just kind of abandoned from mills, from old industry. So they really, some of them are well past their design life. So we're trying to get those down. We prioritize the ones that help fish have a greater extent of habitat, but then next priority is flooding and human health benefits.
And, you know, so that's like one aspect, but we can all take part in helping our neighborhood river. And that's one of the things is the sweeps. When I was up at the Hudson Children's Book Festival last weekend, it was such a treat to have so many people come up to my desk, my table, and say to me, "We just came from the sweep. We were down at the riverside picking up trash, and now we're here." And you know, that's something. It doesn't take much. You know, you don't have to have this huge commitment. You could go down on on your lunch hour and just pick up a few pieces of trash along the river, and you're doing something. And you don't have to be any specific age or anything. We could all, do a little bit. So there's, of course, all of the scientific things that are being done are fantastic, but it's limitless.
It is limitless. So one of the things around the picking up the garbage is, of course, if we pick it up in our rivers, then it's not making it into our oceans. So you hear a lot about the big, ocean marine debris problem, but of course it's all being fed from rivers and streams and small communities. And part of what we also do is to have better and smarter laws to help make sure that waste is better managed. And I just want to call out Dan Shapley, who heads our policy program, who's here with his family and is a resident. He's your neighborhood Riverkeeper, and he heads our policy efforts and does a lot of that strategic thinking around, we got the ground game, and then we've got the how do we change the system so we don't end up with a million styrofoam Dunkin' Donuts cups,
right?
In our creeks.
But I know when I was writing the book and took part in one of the sweeps, I have some pictures in here of some of the trash that was pulled out, and you'd be surprised, of what gets pulled out along the banks and what makes it to the riverside. And one of the things which doesn't make it possibly into the ocean is, fishing line. Is some
it's
things
really
that are
dangerous
really dangerous. And, it's dangerous for even if people are going in it and swimming.
Yeah. And it's still normal, this whole idea of what we kind of take for granted as being normal, it's still totally normal and accepted to throw cigarette butts.
Right.
On the ground. Why are cigarette butts with those disgusting filters and all those chemicals? Somehow that's not garbage, and we get a lot of those kind of gross little loose filters.
I took some, it's not the usual pictures that you probably will find in some of my books, but pictures of trash being gathered up is a really important way that we can all do something. And when I was taking part in that sweep, there were folks from 5 years old up to 80 years old, taking part, which is great. Everybody could do it. And then just being able to have fun, having those fish counts and having things that everybody can take part in, and really being able to enjoy. We have this amazing spot, that runs all the way up where you could kayak in rapids up at the top, and go whitewater rafting all the way in the Adirondacks to a whale watch. I mean, wow, that's pretty cool, isn't it? Of course, I feel like I'm a cheerleader for our river, but why not, right? It's ours, it's all of ours. So is there anything that you wanted to talk about with any of the parts of the book that maybe
Well, I liked how you did interviews of different people who have different roles in the organization, so it kind of weaves in the history, but also a lot of different ways that you can contribute, everything from our boat captain to the woman who runs our water quality the cleanup and the monitoring work. So I think it's just a good kind of overview of all the different ways, especially for young people as you're thinking about your careers. Like, not everybody knows all the different unusual nitty-gritty ways you can contribute to something you care about,
Right.
like the environment. You don't have to be a marine biologist. You could be an artist, you could be a storyteller, you could be a journalist.
Exactly.
So I love that.
Thank you. When I wrote River Wild years ago, and that was, as I said, focused on North American rivers, I interviewed a lot of river keepers. And the one thing that I found fascinating was that they all came from different backgrounds. Some were river guides, some were lawyers, some were scientists. Sky's the limit. It was just amazing. And it really demonstrated that there's a role for everybody.
Yeah.
And there's just so many different avenues that can take you to protecting a part of nature that you love. It doesn't have to be even the river. It could be anything.
And that mix of skills is what lets you come up with some good novel strategies and creative ways of doing it than if you just had all lawyers or all scientists or all storytellers.
Right.
So it's that mix that where the innovative work
And as
comes
you
out.
said, and even the teams that were doing water testing
Yeah.
in here, in Troy, that were really doing that on a regular basis. So, yeah, it was.
Yeah, so it's kind of a fun story, and it's also a bit of a career, like, idea percolator and natural history, and then you have the history in the back. So yeah, there's a lot. It's a thin book, but there's a lot of wisdom and information in here, so congratulations.
Thank you. I think we have some time for questions that, if anybody has any questions about either of the books. Carrie?
Yeah, so I'll read the book, but was it mainly like a charge led by not-for-profits? And then you kind of got the support of governments, or was it, was
The
it?
Riverkeeper itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Riverkeeper was initiated by people who were recreational fishermen mostly, who loved and interacted with the river mostly through fishing, and by being there in the environment close up saw pollution happening and were, upset by that and made alliance with the commercial fishermen, because we used to have a whole commercial fishing industry in this valley that's totally gone and lost to history now. Because of the PCBs contamination, that was really, that was kind of the final nail in the coffin of people wanting to buy and eat Hudson River fish back in the 70s and 80s. So it was that common cause of people who loved the fish and the wildlife and were seeing the pollution. And even before the Clean Water Act, which is our main tool for protecting the Hudson, was passed, that was passed in 73, this organization started in the 60s, in 66, and they found an older law called the Refuse Act that hadn't been used to enforce against polluters, to make it illegal and have a fine that you could apply against polluters. But they made the case that that act actually could be used in that format and brought it to court and won, and kind of established this new way of doing environmental protection with law. That was kind of the novel seed of what started the Riverkeeper. And it was a sports fisherman and journalist named Bob Boyle who came up with that theory, and then started working with attorneys, proved the theory, continued to bring legal actions, and then he also, through reading other books, came across this idea of a river keeper, like the watchman on the boat on the river, and so that became another piece of the puzzle that he thought was part of the solution. And that group built their first boat and hired their first keeper in the 80s. And by then the Clean Water Act had passed and more people were starting to model what they were doing, so it all just started to build. And it wasn't until, I think, 86 when they trashed the first homemade boat and got more of a kind of substantial secondhand boat, the one that we still have now, this 36-foot wooden Chesapeake Dead Rise. And renamed it Riverkeeper and became kind of official with full-time staff, and then started to grow the model. But even in the beginning, it looks so different now because there was so much wanton pollution before there was the Clean Water Act that when I started at Riverkeeper in 2007, almost everyone on staff was a lawyer. And it was just like suing people until finally the message got through, oh, we can't just, open this pipe or, do this and do that, that there actually are rules and regulations, and government got stronger, more permits were developed, like permitting around stormwater runoff and other types of regulations. And then over time, we've added more science, kind of realizing that doing our own science is important because, of course, the government, a permit is a permission to pollute. So there's certain things they've looked at and said, we'll give you permission to pollute to this degree on this thing, but there's all this other stuff they haven't looked at yet. So bringing in the science, what else is getting in the water, and then, like I said, the policy work, as we discover new pollutants, then how do we get new laws to address those? So now we've kind of got this, we've kind of figured out the whole cycle of measure, regulate, or plan around a pollutant, and then measure the efficacy of that plan, do enforcement, repeat. So we basically have staff that does all of those roles. We're like a little microcosm of the Environmental Protection Association, federally, Environmental Protection Agency, and the state level one. And the Clean Water Act is like really like what makes it so powerful and impactful is that it has this citizen suit clause where it lets people sue on behalf of clean water for your waterway. And the Clean Air Act is the same thing. It gives citizens the right to sue for clean air. That was like the legal revolution, which is why our work is now driven by those laws, not the Refuse Act anymore. And that's where groups like Riverkeeper with members, we actually need members to join us in these suits to have standing. We can say, I live in Rhinebeck, this person is dumping, their cement truck out of their parking lot, at the end of the day, every day. It's, it personally harms me for this water pollution to take place, and then we work with people and bring those legal actions and get it to stop.
So, like when I was growing up in Wales, in the city, I talk about the factories that were along. This is pre Clean Water Act. So it was okay, or it wasn't illegal, for a car manufacturing plant in Westchester to release paint into the river. Like it would change color depending on what the cars they were painting. It would literally, the water would change color. You're like, today is red, today is blue. The sugar factories along the way were releasing into the river, all of those things. And that's not even counting, sewage. Those were just factories. And then you think about, all of the sewage that's going in from towns. And one of the things that in my other book, When the World Runs Dry, I also talk about is agriculture pollution from farms, the chemicals from farms going into rivers and waterways too. So there's just so many things that can enter a river, and that can enter our river. So the Clean Water Act really changed a lot of that and enabled action, enabled a lot of this, but that doesn't mean that it's finished. Jen?
I have two questions. You might have addressed this, and sorry, I had to step out with the dog. But does every river in America have a riverkeeper? Like, is there a major river? How many riverkeepers are there?
So there are over 300 worldwide, so it is a global network. I think in the US we're at about 150. So people apply to be riverkeepers. So the model is that you have someone, there's a list in the book, of course, very thorough research. So if people are doing work on a river and they decide they want to become the official riverkeeper, if there isn't one on that waterway, you apply. So you reach out to the Waterkeeper Alliance, and then if you're accepted as a riverkeeper, then you're part of the alliance. You use the brand. There's conferences, there's training and resources. So we're one of the original. We were kind of the model for the riverkeepers, and then shortly formed after us in adjacent waterways. Not surprising, Long Island Soundkeeper, Hackensack Riverkeeper, and New York, New Jersey Baykeeper. That was kind of the original group, and then it started to spread.
But now there's like a Chesapeake Bay
Keeper, yeah.
I mean, it was
keeper, there's
I remember Nancy talking about how literally everyone in America lives in a watershed, and I was like, how can that be? Like, if you're in Arizona or something where there's no water, like, how? But I looked it up, and
So
sure
they're
enough,
bigger.
he's right.
Yeah. So the drier ones are bigger, yeah, everywhere, every piece of land, the water, if a raindrop falls, it drains somewhere, so whatever that drainage destination is, that's your watershed.
So then, my second question is a little bit more grim, I'm so sorry. But given the current unpleasantness in Washington, and the fact that they seem to be wanting to really like gut a lot of protections for things, like, are you okay? And what can we do to help the river?
Thank you, thanks for that question. So, yeah, it's definitely dark times, and, you know, the EPA, I think the most recent cut like 55 or 60%, I think was the last thing that I heard in terms of staffing levels, and you see a lot of cuts in other agencies, especially around science. Science is really entering like a dark age of science now.
I mean, even now, like today I read the National Science Foundation is being gutted of all 37 departments. They're just doing away with those departments. So,
Yeah.
you know, those are some of the things that we're facing.
Yeah. So, yeah, so I mean, no, we're not okay, you know, to be honest, but we're gonna keep doing what we do, and I think the important thing for all of us now is just to really focus, you know, locally and regionally on our bioregions and our watersheds and our state laws, and just try to, you know, model what we know is the right way to do this work and good governance. And I think in New York, we have a lot of resources and good leadership that we can remain a beacon then for when the other states that more quickly are eclipsed by government overreach and under support, you know, can still see models in the states that kind of get through this period with most of their resources intact, we hope. I would say for Riverkeeper, you know, definitely it's going to be a financial hit. We get about 20% of our funding through government grants. So become a member, you know, support us. I brought a couple things, a little brochure and our impact report, and then this sign is a QR code. You can sign up and be a member. So yeah, so we have to all kind of stand up the local groups like Riverkeeper that can offer to step into the gap. And there's no way we could step into the scale of what we're gonna be losing, you know, state and federal. But fortunately, we do have science, we do have lawyers and enforcement and watchdogs out in the field and people who can write laws and people who can engage the public. So we'll just run that model as best as we can in this region.
And I think, you know, one of the things that I wanted to demonstrate in Wales, in the city, was how voices matter. You know, that we can all make a difference and that we have to keep our voices raised wherever we can. The Clean Water Act would not have happened if those voices weren't raised to begin with. So this is a time where we need that again.
And the Clean Water Act was passed during the Nixon administration,
Yeah.
but over a veto. So he gets credit, but he shouldn't really get credit because he did veto it, but it was so overwhelmingly supported in Congress
Yes.
that they were able to override that. So, you know, who knows, maybe we get that kind of a pressure cooker going again and we'll innovate some other new great laws and paths forward. I do think this type of climate, it can be an innovation engine. The pressure of losing resources and losing the norms, you know, makes you have to be scrappy and experimental. So we'll see what we can come up with.
But it's in motion, you know, we do have a motion. So there's things in place and we have to just kind of keep on that. I
Protect
think.
what we have,
Protect what we
and
have.
replicate some
Exactly.
of what we lose
Yes.
federally. I mean, when we lose
Right.
federal protections around, let's say like PFAS in the drinking water,
Right.
we can then pass a state criteria to replicate that. So that's some of the game plan that we are engaged with. But you know, that doing that kind of work, replicating what was federal protections at a state level, there's an opportunity cost. It means we're not doing the innovative work we wanted to be doing, that we were on the track to doing. So even when we're doing it, there are opportunity costs, and this period is definitely going to be
Challenging.
a slowdown.
Yeah, definitely. Virginia?
Is the Riverkeeper a part of state curricula in elementary, middle schools, high schools, in New York State or my own state, Oregon, and it's Columbia River, that we share with Washington and the world? Do states have a curricula so that teachers who may be naive or just not up to date on what Riverkeeper is, how it works, and what the possibilities are for their students, are there curricula in states and around the nation?
We don't have our own curricula. We do have a curricula that we developed that's covered in the book with this group, the Media Lab, based in Troy. And so that's for high school age students, but maybe Dan wants to speak about, there is like a Hudson River estuary curricula. You want to talk a little bit about
And
that?
fourth grade always does local history. So part of fourth grade curriculum deals with the Hudson River, up and down the river. Yes.
Yeah, so there is the DEC, our state agency, has what's called the Hudson River Estuary Program. It's based in mostly New Paltz, but a little bit in Hyde Park at the Norrie Point Environmental Education Center. There's staff there as well. And they have a K through 12 curriculum you can find online, and it's aligned with the learning standards in the state, so it's available for teachers. It was written quite a few years ago, so it probably could use a refresh, but it's got a lot of good stuff in it. And I don't know if you want to tell the story about how the estuary program was even established out of that moment with Boyle in the.
You can tell it.
Okay. It's so the Storm King Mountain, as you know, that beautiful gateway to the Highlands as you take the train south, there was a power plant proposed there, and it kind of kicked off the environmental movement in a lot of ways by ultimately giving citizens right to protect a resource based on the impact of a project. But in the midst of that fight, Riverkeeper at the time, Bob Boyle, who Tracy mentioned was the founder, was basically facing a judge over the impact of this, the question of how much this power plant would impact the river. And he was saying, well, because the river is tidal, it's an estuary, the drawing in of water for this power plant will affect the fish multiple times a day, because they drift up, they drift back, they drift up, they drift back. And the judge said, on whose authority is it an estuary, is a river? Like, they just didn't know basic facts about how the system worked. So out of that, and it was kind of an example of exactly what Tracy is saying, is sort of like taking a negative and then turning it to a positive. That Riverkeeper of that time fought for the law that established the Hudson River Estuary Program, which now has this wonderful, complement of programs focused on ecosystem-based management for the estuary, and we recognize that it's an estuary.
The estuary
It is tidal.
So take that, Judge. That's whose authority.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Suzanne?
So we do have a couple kids here tonight. I'm wondering, I'm sure it's in the book, but maybe you could give us a couple little ideas of what kids can do to make a difference in their communities.
Well, how about you start, I'll add.
Okay, let's see. So, boy, kids. Well, one of the things that you could definitely do is, talking to your parents and reminding people to keep the river clean and get people outside to connect with it and get to know it and spend time with it. I would say other things, think about your drinking water and what comes out of your tap too, because that's another big piece of it, like understanding where your water comes from, not wasting the drinking water, because it actually takes a lot of energy and resources to get water to be that clean and show up in your house. So just understanding that whole cycle of the water outside, the water up in the sky, the rain, and what comes out in your tap, and getting familiar with where you live, where all that water cycle goes and comes from.
And I'll add to that. So you could do an actual water challenge at your house. And, do any of us know how much water we actually use a day? It's kind of tough, right? Because we turn the tap on and it just runs. And we don't measure that water that's running, right? So we really don't know. We take a shower, but we don't really know how much water is going down into the drain. So you could do a water challenge, and you could see if you could fill a gallon of water And you could see if you could use that all day long. Could you use that for your drinking, for your cooking, for your brushing your teeth, for your for washing your hands? How far does it get? Do you use it really quickly? Or does it last you the whole day? Could you cook with it too? And that would just give you an idea of how much water you actually use. And then you can look up, if you get my other book out of the library, in my water book, I talk about like how often to wash clothes. When we wash our clothes, that takes a lot of water. And sometimes we don't have to wash our clothes that often. And we could buy clothes that last longer, so that we don't have to, when we have a pair of jeans and a t-shirt on, that takes so many gallons of water to produce, because the jeans are cotton, and the cotton is grown on a farm, and the farm uses a lot of water. Cotton is like one of the thirstiest crops that we have. So all of those things that we, even wearing our clothes, takes water, and we forget that. So limiting ourselves to only buying what we need, buying less packaging, all of those things, I think, contribute to the health of our communities, the health of ourselves, and the health of our river in the long run. And those are just things that you could do in your own home, that I think contribute at any age to what we're doing. And the more that we can help our environment, just turning off the lights when we leave a room, those simple things that probably you all know and you probably already do. Recycling, having compost, doing all of those things add to the health of our whole community. So whether you're picking up, visiting the park and picking up trash, and taking a little bag with you when you go to the park and play next time, and taking out the trash that you bring, but picking up a few things when you see it is helpful. It won't end up in our streams, it won't end up in our river, it won't end up in the ocean. The fish will be happy, everybody's happy. So trying to think of things on a smaller level, but those smaller things have a big impact if we all do them.
What she said.
Anybody have any more questions? Yes.
Yeah, how far north do the whales come? Do they leave the New York harbor?
They don't. They obviously can't come all the way up here. They're in that harbor area. Have you heard any?
They have come up the
around?
Hudson River. There's some beautiful photographs of them, but that's really rare. Usually they stay in the harbor, but there have been some sightings, and also the harbor seals will come up, but not past Manhattan. I don't think they've gotten past up to the George Washington Bridge.
No.
But once you get out of the harbor, so we have an annual whale watch. So if anyone wants to see whales in New York Harbor in September, come with us. It's so fun. It's crazy fun. We go out of Brooklyn, and you just get on one of these whale watching boats, and you just go south off of Sandy Hook, and there's whales breaching. And porpoises, pods of porpoises, and seals. It's incredible.
It was never happening. Like if you wanted to go on a whale watch, you would go to Cape Cod or Maine or someplace.
It's
right?
really
Not
fun. You
out
should
of New
definitely
York
come
City.
with us. And a lot of people who will be on the boat will have never been on a whale watch or seen a whale before. So it's really a spiritual experience to see an animal of that size in the wild, and especially to do it near one of the highest population locations in the U.S. It's gorgeous.
What year was that they started coming back?
2019, 2018.
Yeah, there was the little Gotham whale business that started. Yes. It was just like a captain in his own little boat. I remember when he started going out to say
And there's
that
like
they were
400
there.
sightings a year now, or more, right?
And
And
how many
it's,
species? Like a bunch of species?
I listed 4 in the book. 4 different species.
When we've gone out, we've done it twice. This year will be our 3rd year. Mostly we see humpback, but we did see some minke as well. But there's also right that pass through.
Right. There's
and is it
right.
fin? Right.
Yes,
yeah. Right
fin,
whale and
right
fin.
whale. Yes. 4 different ones.
But I don't know if they are there in the
Regular,
summer.
right, they're
Yeah, I
not-
think they're kind of
they're not,
seasonal pass-throughs. But there's pods of humpback that are there year-round now. And
Yeah.
so many porpoises.
I had the.
Or is it dolphins?
There's dolphins.
Dolphins.
Dolphins. I did a school visit in the spring, a month ago, at Battery Park School. And it's one of my favorite visits. I've gone there a few times. They have a library on the 6th floor in Battery Park. The library has these two beautiful banks of windows. And when you look out the window, you see the Statue of Liberty. It's this. It's exactly this. And to be in that library and talk to the kids about what's happening right outside of their school is an amazing, and not many of the kids actually even knew it. That was the frustrating part for it's like, it's happening if you just stand at your window long enough, you're going to see a whale. But it's amazing that you can have a school and just have those whales right out there now in their harbor, right outside their window, which is pretty amazing.
It's a great dividend to get back after the kind of the bad old days and how bad things got, like you
Yes.
tell the art in that book. And now we've got the whales, we've got the
Right.
porpoises, we've got people swimming. We're working to open more beaches. The Hudson still has very scarce number of beaches, but now with the improvements, we think we need to have more, so.
And like I always say, I wrote a book called Back from the Brink about 8 different species of animals, wildlife that have returned from the brink of extinction. One of them being our bald eagles. And the bald eagle is another part of the Hudson River ecosystem. I have taken that train down to Manhattan and counted 30 eagles on the ice in the winter, and those eagles were not here when I was growing up either. Not only were the fish not in the river, but the eagles were having problems laying eggs because of the DDT. And we had to ban DDT in order for the eagles to come back and have a breeding program for them.
They're
But
mostly
again,
Canadian eagles now, right? We had to bring them down from Canada.
no,
Someone told
some
me
of
that.
them, maybe Alaska, some of them.
Yeah, they had to be imported because we kind of killed our.
When I was a kid, there were 2 bald eagles living in New York State, and they were living on a lake out in western New York, a small little lake. They had one little nest, and every time they would lay eggs, the eggs would be too fragile for them to hatch, and that was it. I never saw an eagle in the wild, and if I go and visit a school right now and say to kids, how many of you have seen an eagle? All the hands go up. And I know at my house, I see eagles. And I saw 2 just the other day with friends down in Hyde Park. They are everywhere. And again, that's a success story, and we have those successes. That doesn't mean we have to rest on our shirt tails, and say like, okay, we're done. We're not done. But it proves that we can do it. And it proves that if we just keep our momentum up and find new ways to protect our environment, that we can have these successes. Yeah. So I think we're about to our limit, unless we have one more question.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.